Hello everyone, I call myself Zondagskind and I like talking about Civilization VI. It's been a while since I made the last tier list with the unique units, and this month I want to take a look at the unique infrastructures, the buildings, the improvements and districts that different civs bring to the table. For the unique unit tier list, I took the unorthodox approach of completely divorcing units from their civs. For the unique infrastructure, there's a lot less of a reason to do so. First off, even though there is one leader-specific building officially, in practical terms, the same nation will always have the same unique infrastructure, so synergies with a civ ability and spawn bias are perfectly fine to factor in. Also, synergies with unique infrastructure are built into the leader or civ abilities more often than for unique units, so for some, it's nearly impossible not to factor it in. For example, the extra district production Nubia gets for Nubian pyramids, or the science on mines for Korean Sowons, really should be taken into account. There will still, however, be a little extra appreciation for bonuses that work not just for the home civ, but would so for other civs as well. Also, I've decided to break up the unique infrastructure tier list into 3 videos, one for buildings, one for improvements, and one for districts, and we will start in this video with the unique buildings. First off, this is so I don't have to compare apples to oranges as much, but also, it means that I have 3 opportunities to plug this year's CivGive. On the 1st of December, I will take part in the 5th annual CivGive, where we will be raising money for Gamers Outreach, a charity that helps children in hospitals through their time there with video games. You can donate money via the link in the description to make me do things during the event, like praising Tamar, teaching you how to say Scheveningen, or singing along to the Norwegian soundtrack. Also, this year's Dutch Open multiplayer has been moved to November 17 to already raise money beforehand. If you want to take part and challenge White Nerdy for the title of Dutch Open Champion, join the Discord server and send me a message. Now, as for the relative ranking of buildings against districts and improvements, I think on average buildings are the weakest of the 3. You first have to build a district for the normal cost, whereas other civs can get their unique districts for less production. And then, whilst those unique districts are already giving their bonuses, you still have to get the appropriate building, which usually isn't discounted. However, it must be said that some buildings make up for that by sheer impact on the game, so let's get them ranked against each other from S to F tier. In alphabetical order, we first go to the Macedonian Basilikoi Paides. It unlocks at bronze working and replaces the barracks, so especially in aggressive games it should be coming in decently early. A nice bonus for Macedon is that it gives experience to Hetairoi. Usually that is the stable's job, so you don't have to solve that dilemma to get good units. The science from unit production is nice, although I generally try to have the core army of warriors and slingers by then already. It's a fine replacement of a building you were going to get anyway, nothing too amazing, but good enough for C tier. The Japanese Electronics Factory is a unique building that hardly feels like an improvement of the generic building it replaces. Unlocking at industrialization, its only bonuses are that, if powered, it provides 2 extra production to cities in its area of effect, and it provides 4 culture from electricity onwards. It teeters on the edge of F tier, and it is only safe from that because at least Japan was very likely to get some good factories anyway. They like to pack cities close together and get great adjacencies, and at least this building's yields can be improved on by getting 3 envoys into an industrial city-state. Even more underwhelming for seasoned players is the film studio. Its bonus is 100% extra tourism against other civilizations which have entered the modern era, but by that stage, you should be either done or on your way to winning the game anyway. For a yield that is only useful for 1 victory condition and a building type you already don't need tons of, that's pretty abysmal. Giving it an extra work slot would have been such an obvious fix, but alas. Unlock it at radio, build it for the Aeroscore, then nodding in agreement with me that this is the pinnacle of F tier. The Ottoman Grand Bazaar unlocks at banking and is a pretty good replacement for the bank. It's nice that it's cheaper to build, especially because I don't usually like building a lot of banks. The other bonuses are a little too stealthy and only really seem to shine during a world conquest. If I generally liked banks better, it might be a C tier, but because this is basically an extra item on your to build list, it's only a D tier. The Madrasa from Arabia, on the other hand, is an easy addition to the A tier. It replaces the university and has a slight edge over it in terms of science output, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. The faith from campus adjacency means you turn your campus into an honorary holy site, and it makes natural philosophy, and later on 5-year plan, an even better card to slot in. But even more importantly than that, it unlocks at theology, which comes in so much earlier than education that even a science specialist without a religion should have madrasas up an era earlier than universities. Factor in that Arabia always has a religion, and you know why this building feels so darn good. The Māori Marae is somewhat like the Basilikoi Paides, a good replacement of a generic building you were likely getting anyway. Unlocking at drama and poetry, I would say its edge over the amphitheater is definitely bigger, with a lot of your tiles potentially turning into mini parks at flight. But that's a bonus that only matters for one game. The culture and faith on tiles is great. Do remember that part of that is to compensate for the penalty of not getting great writers. It definitely feels stronger than all the buildings in D tier and below, but also somewhat less versatile than all the ones in B and up. So I think C tier is a fair compromise. Portugal benefits a lot from the navigation school, which unlocks at education like the generic university. The science yield from coastal tiles gives the building a very high potential, and universities are generally good to build anyway. The two reasons it sits one tier lower than the Madrasa are the Madrasa unlocking much earlier and the navigation school only working on maps with a lot of coast. Granted, I wouldn't want to play Portugal on Pangaea anyway, but by comparison, the Madrasa is a lot more reliable. The Mongolian Ordu's bonus, in theory, is pretty interesting, with extra movement for cavalry trained in the city, but I find it pretty underwhelming as a war-focused building. By the time I've unlocked the Ordu at horseback riding, had time to build it, and recruit a horseman from the city, one movement usually isn't at the top of my priority list. Combat strength is. It becomes more useful later on when your Keshik enter the battlefield and your light cavalry can pillage with one movement, but by then you notice it less with great generals also roaming the field. Genghis' combat strength bonus feels more impactful in a stage where the Ordu is meant to shine, so it's an E tier for me. The Babylonian Palgum was very close to making it into S tier because it is a pretty insane building. It unlocks at irrigation, which for Babylon just means you have to farm one resource, and even if your city center were the only tile on a river, the Palgum would still give one housing and production more than the generic watermill. The ceiling in terms of food yields is insane, although I do usually tend to build districts on tiles next to rivers, so I sometimes have to finagle my way into benefiting from it. The only reason the Palgum isn't in S tier is that the buildings that are truly game defining, so I hope you will forgive me for this A tier. I will pray for that forgiveness in the Khmer Prasat, replacing the temple and unlocking at theology. The Khmer are a civ that would always get temples even if they didn't have a unique one, and this one has a better faith output, culture from population, and even tourism to boot. Especially in a civ that already likes building tall and pious cities before factoring in this building, the Prasat is, in my opinion, the best building bar none. A must-have in all your Khmer cities for religion and culture games, and a very common fixture in other games. The Prasat must be in S tier. And so is the Swedish, or officially Kristina's, Queen's Bibliothèque. Unlocking at your second tier government, so practically at Divine Right or Exploration, you will very happily build this instead of the Intelligence Agency, Grandmaster's Chapel and Foreign Ministry. It gives you room for 6 great works, which you'll automatically theme and get huge culture and tourism yields from. And it also gives a decent amount of great people points to earn them with. It is quite literally the centerpiece of Swedish culture games, but also very useful in any other instance. I am more than happy giving this an S tier, although I must say it is a lot less obvious than for the Prasat. Then we go to Sweden's neighbor, Norway, and it replaces the temple with the Stave church at theology, and compared to the Prasat this is very lackluster. Getting extra adjacency from woods is nice, but not usually a very big boost, and production on coastal resources is okay considering Norway's start bias, but other than the Stave church, they have very little incentive for building holy sites in the first place. Some people will likely even argue this building should be down lower, but I do appreciate Stave churches enough to go for religions with Norway, and this, let's say, interesting but somewhat mismatched building gets to sit in D tier. The Sukiennice is probably the building that sits the highest compared to how little people seem to care about it, but that is for good reason. Unlocking at currency to replace the market, which you were going to want to build in all non-coastal towns anyway, the Sukiennice makes Poland's domestic trade routes just as lucrative as international ones, and international trade routes just as productive as domestics, which is a pretty big deal. It gives you a big incentive to prioritize to commercial hubs with Sukiennice and go for boosts on guilds and medieval fairs, and trade is useful in every single game of Civ you'll ever play. It might not be as impactful as the buildings in C tier, but I'm literally going to build one in every town that doesn't have a lighthouse, so I'm not even sorry about this B tier. What I am sorry for is Hungary's thermal bath as it lingers in F tier. Unlocking at natural history, it does have a clear advantage over the zoo it replaces, with an extra amenity to all cities in the area of effect and a discount factory effect as well. Also, considering Hungary tends to spawn near geothermal fissures, it isn't that uncommon to have opportunities to get the thermal bath in a city with one, but the reward you get for that is distinctly underwhelming. The problem is that Hungary can already be done with the game by now, if you want, and even in the optimal scenario, you are maybe getting 2 decent thermal baths. Congratulations! Sadly, this bath stinks and sinks to the bottom. So does the Aztec Tlachtli, unlocking at games and recreation and slightly cheaper than the arena it replaces. Like the thermal bath, it suffers from entertainment complexes not being a high priority district, especially this early on. And while I do appreciate the extra faith, culture and great general point, that's also a bit too unfocused to really be a saving grace. Build one if you want to go for Colosseum anyway, but otherwise you might even want to ignore this building altogether. And finally, I will praise Tamar, as she is merciful enough to let me slander the Georgian Tsikhe without striking me down. I do like the Tsikhe, mostly for the aesthetics, and Georgia does of course have bonuses to getting walls faster, so having a Renaissance walls replacement unlock at siege tactics and give some extra bonuses is a logical endpoint. The bonuses aren't even that terrible. Assuming you're in a golden age, it's 8 faith and 12 tourism at conservation, but what drags the Tsikhe down most of all is that you would otherwise mostly ignore walls, certainly medieval and Renaissance walls, as other civs. So it's something you have to go out of your way to get. It will get an E tier for me. Sorry about it. So there you have it, 16 unique buildings ranked from S to F tier. If you liked it, please do press that thumbs up button. Did you agree with my rankings, or are you adamant that the film studio is actually an S tier building? Let me know down in the comments. In any case, subscribe and ding that bell if you want to know when the unique improvements tier list goes live, and we will see you then. Bye bye.